event.
Is the record. He's got now just about 1 minute to go in order to break it.
There are probably some runners who have more experience running the New York City Marathon than Alberto Salazar. He went to the starting line 3 times and won 3 times. Here's the last 385 yards of the 1981 New York City Marathon.
2:08:33 is what he's got. He's got less than 30 seconds to go to make it. The clock is in sight.
He's driving his arm.
He's got 30 seconds left for world record performance.
He's gonna do it. He's gonna get it. He's gonna do it.
A new world record.
He's gonna do it.
2:08:13, the New York City Marathon.
Hi, I'm Alberto Salazar. I was fortunate to have a long and successful running career even before I ran my first step across the Verrazano Bridge in the New York City Marathon. Little did I know when that cannon sounded that a whole new world of challenge lay ahead of me.
Let's get started with a quick course overview, from the start right to the finish. Later in the program, the tape will go into more detail as to what you can expect throughout the course. The signature feature of the New York City Marathon is the start over the Verrazano. Be sure to savor those views in the mile-and-a-half on the bridge. Over 11 miles of the race are in the borough of Brooklyn, mostly on the straight and flat 4th Avenue. The men's and women's course merge at the 8th mile mark, near the Brooklyn Academy of Music. Then there's the slight uphill of the Pulaski Bridge, taking the runners from Brooklyn to Queens. The 15-mile mark is just before the 59th Street Bridge, and here's where you'll get your first good view of Manhattan. Coming off the bridge is one of the most exciting moments in all of sports because of the huge crowds for the 4 miles up 1st Avenue. Most runners are well advised to discipline themselves to slow down. There's still lots of running to be done. At the 20-mile mark, it's across the Harlem River into the Bronx. This is where the training miles really begin to pay off. Back into Manhattan and down 5th Avenue, crowds begin to swell and the neighborhood turns out in force. Then, right before the 23-mile mark, it's a tough uphill into Central Park, the promised land. Because if you made it this far, you know you'll get to the finish line. There are some slight turns and hills in the park, but suddenly the finish line appears and there's no feeling like those last 385 yards. The 26.2-mile course offers a ground-level view of the city, and no city in the world can match the enthusiasm of the 2 million spectators on race day.
26-mile, 385-yard marathon is one of the greatest physical and mental challenges in all of sport, whether your goal is to win or just to get to the finish line. The purpose of this tape is to help you in your marathon training and to make your race day a day to remember.
There is such a variety of expectations and athletic backgrounds among the participants of the marathon that it would be impossible to design one single plan to suit everyone. But there are general guidelines that can help all runners. When Alberto ran his first marathon, New York City in 1980, he had a plan and a goal, and he stuck with it right to the finish line. That's the key to success, regardless of your pace. His training at the University of Oregon indicated that if he ran smart, he should be able to break 2 hours, 10 minutes, if he stuck to his race plan. It was the fastest first-time marathon in the history of the sport.
Salazar now coming into view. He's got a good shot to be under 2:10. One of the most incredible athletic performances. 2:09:40 unofficially. 2:09:40 for Al Salazar at the New York City Marathon. I can't tell you how unbelievably amazing that is.
Now, if you happen to be one of the elite marathoners of the world and your goal was to win, you'd have to be near the front in the later stages of the race. That's how you win the wreath. But for a disabled athlete finishing well after dark, winning has nothing to do with time. It's about getting to the finish line. Seasoned elite runners aim for that magic sub-3-hour marathon, a 6:51 per mile pace. For others, it's the sub-4-hour marathon, a 9-minute and 10-second per mile pace. In fact, the average finish time for New York City marathoners is around 4 hours and 17 minutes, a pace of just under 10 minutes per mile. At the end of this tape, there are a number of Alberto's drills and technique points that may be of interest to those who might be a little more experienced than the first-time marathoner.
Whether your goal is to run a 5-minute mile or a 15-minute mile, have a race plan. Be flexible, but run smart.
The marathon is the ultimate physical challenge for the average athlete. It's important to remember that while getting to the finish line may be your top priority, how you get there is reasonably important.
Any experienced marathoner will tell you that one of the most important elements of a good race plan is proper pacing. Whether it's your first marathon or your goal is to get to the finish line comfortably, a good rule of thumb to follow, you should be able to carry on a conversation with the runner next to you.
The last miles are always difficult with a high level of discomfort. There's no need for them to be painful. With runners coming from 100 countries, some going for prize money or personal records, many are seasoned racers who know their capabilities, and the New York Roadrunners Club does their best to keep you on track, with digital clocks at each mile. It's not unusual to make new friends along the course, settling into a rhythm and pace that makes the miles move more quickly. Knowing what to expect on race day is an important part of a successful marathon experience. As we go through the course start to finish, we will visit with all aspects of the New York City Marathon experience. Race day begins, for most, with a bus ride across the Verrazano to the staging area on Fort Wadsworth on Staten Island. Because of the enormous logistical challenges involved, everything happens early. The first buses begin loading at 5:30 a.m., and the starting cannon doesn't fire until 10 minutes of 11. So it's important to plan for several hours of just hanging around. Not that there isn't plenty to do, but it probably wouldn't be a good idea to start jumping jacks 3 hours before the cannon. There are plenty of breakfast items, church services, music, a warm-up stage, and a worldwide quantity of camaraderie.
These are what we're handing out. And these are the very people that you want.
As start time approaches, runners can simply put their belongings in bags which are reclaimed at the family reunion area after the race. Alternatively, many runners wear gear that they can discard as they work their way to the starting line. All usable items are donated to charity. And when you put 32,000 high-energy people from around the world in one place at one time, you can expect some fringe personalities to emerge. The key to a good pre-race strategy on Staten Island in the hours and minutes before the cannon is to take in the spectacle, get off your feet, and don't eat or drink anything that you haven't used in training. Hydrate, try to relax, and enjoy the view. There are 3 separate starting lines for the marathon, designated the blue, green, and red. As you leave the staging area, you will be directed to the appropriate start.
The Verrazano Bridge is the longest hill on the entire New York City Marathon course. With all the excitement of race day, it's easy to get caught up and run too fast early. The crunch of runners is in a way helpful because it forces many to slow down.
The full mosaic of the sights, sounds, and diversity of the city of New York is experienced on Marathon Sunday. The New York City Marathon established the precedent of the urban marathon. Now every major city in the world has a marathon running through the heart of downtown. Let's face it, there's no way to remain calm at the starting line, even if it's your 26th marathon. The guy next to you may have waited a lifetime to get to this moment and place, and enthusiasm is contagious. This is definitely the time to go with the flow. After all the months, and in some cases years, you're on the Verrazano. It can take several minutes to cross the starting line, so there's no point in being aggressive. Except for the handful of elite runners, pacing on the bridge is ludicrous. It's about a mile to the summit at the midpoint of the bridge at 274 feet elevation. But with the crowds, you may not even know you're on the biggest hill on the entire New York City Marathon course. The Verrazano Bridge will vibrate from the pounding of 60,000 feet. But no need to worry about structural integrity. Just keep moving. The New York Roadrunners Club caters to each and every runner, regardless of pace. Keeping the marathon at the forefront is New York Roadrunners Club President and Marathon Director Alan Steinfeld, here holding the finish tape with the mayor. That's Alan with the eye patch. The club live and breathe the marathon year-round and want to keep it special regardless of your finish time. And another responsibility of the race director, hugging that female champion. Alan and the club are proud of the high percentage of finishers.
About 92%, and the reason for that is there's 2 million people along the course, and nobody wants to drop out, as well as a lot of people have come to the race from all over the country and all over the world, and they'll crawl if they have to cross that finish line and get their medal and say they did it.
Finally, off the bridge and into Brooklyn. The runners spend almost 12 miles in this borough, very flat, mostly on 4th Avenue. The key here is to finally get into your planned pace. Among the sites along the way, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where the men's and women's courses merge. The Williamsburg section at the 10-mile mark has a large Hasidic Jewish community, and by that point you should definitely be running on autopilot. We'll be back to the marathon route in just a minute, but first another element of the marathon experience. One of the original features of the New York City Marathon are the 30 bands along the route, strategically positioned to encourage runners to keep those feet moving. So here is the music of the marathon. If you don't particularly like the music of one band, not to worry. Just run a few more blocks and you'll hear another, all the way to the finish line.
One of the keys to running the marathon is it really shouldn't be a one-shot deal. You really should run some 5Ks, 10Ks, or even half marathons to prepare you for running the full 26.2.
If you live in the metro area, you're in luck because on virtually every weekend there's a race, and distances increase as the calendar moves toward the marathon in November. Of course, you can put the same amount of miles in during a training run, but racing experience is invaluable. Pre-race hydration and diet, taking fluids at aid stations, pacing, running in crowds, all are part of the overall package. And clothing. If you're comfortable with a t-shirt and sweatshirt or windbreaker before the start, you may overheat once the horn sounds and you're up and running. The only way to judge the proper layering for clothing on race day is to get to lots of starting lines. The year-round commitment to fitness by New York Roadrunner Club members is celebrated at the annual Club Night Awards ceremony.
I'm happy to congratulate on behalf of the New York Roadrunners Club, based on just another phenomenal year, Tesfaye Bakili.
New York Roadrunners Club Vice President Mary Wittenberg helps to keep the club and the marathon on the right track. And there's lots of competition throughout the age groups to be crowned Runner of the Year. Mary Wittenberg gets to the starting line and finish line of almost all club races.
I think it's great for them. It's always good to go into a marathon with a good sense of pace, and sometimes the best sense of pace comes from running races. You can run in training and time yourself, but it's really when you push yourself and you're in the midst of the momentum with all the other runners that you really have the best stimulation of racing. Primarily, actually, for the marathoners, they're going to focus on 10K, half marathon and above, but it's never bad to do a 5K. It's great to get the speed work in. I mean, that's another good reason to do it. Lots of marathoners are doing it for the first time. They may not be familiar with intervals, and the shorter the race is, if they came out here and run a 2.5-mile race, it'd be great for them. They get some leg speed, get their legs turning over a little faster than they would in a marathon, but you can always rely on that speed at some point in a marathon.
Many of the club's Central Park races actually take place on the marathon course. So come marathon race day, you'll be on familiar territory. Running is a lifestyle sport, and once you embrace it, there's no other way to travel. Part of that lifestyle is the great variety of races that do more than notch up that fitness level. The fun events allow you to let your hair down and celebrate fitness. The ASICS Runner's World Midnight Run annually brings in the new year and is more party than race.
The 59th Street Bridge, or the Queensboro Bridge, is just past the 15-mile mark. Finally, there's a skyline of Manhattan, and just up ahead, the crowds of First Avenue. The bridge offers a good opportunity to take stock of yourself. If you've stayed with a realistic race plan, the miles ahead will be mostly enjoyable.
Coming off the 59th Street Bridge is one of the wildest moments in all of sports, because just up ahead, hundreds of thousands of spectators have been waiting hours to see you. You really must force yourself to slow down, because you still have 10 miles of running to cover, but it's really hard not to pick up the pace. While there are lots of people cheering in Brooklyn and Queens, the box seats are in Manhattan. Almost everybody knows somebody in the race, and they're not going home until they're cheered out. The cheers are not just for the fast guys. In fact, speed has nothing to do with it. Just about the time the big crowds are heading up First Avenue, the winners are collecting their checks at the finish line in Central Park. If you've been running at the median pace of 9:50 per mile, you've already been on the course for over 2.5 hours. So the best strategy is to enjoy the First Avenue experience to the extent that you can, but save that adrenaline for later in the day. Hydration is an important factor in performance in a marathon, particularly on a hot and humid day. There are 8 stations every mile on the marathon course, and it's not a bad idea to slow down at each one and grab a cup. The 8 stations themselves stretch for 50 yards or so you don't have to grab the water or Gatorade from the very first volunteer. If you decide to stop while you're drinking, good etiquette might suggest to move up the road a bit so you don't block other runners.
Gatorade. Here, sir. Thank you. Get your Gatorade, man. Quench the thirst.
To have a successful marathon experience, you've got to put in the training miles. But part of the package is cross-training, cycling, swimming, blading. Other sports offer both mental and physical rewards that will help you in your preparation for the marathon.
Here we go.
Great. Perfect.
Very few runners, on whatever level, go through a career, or for that matter a year, without some sort of leg or foot discomfort or injury. Supplementing your training with other sports is definitely the way to go. It will keep you on the roads. A great program for metro area runners is Doug Stern's Deepwater running classes. Increasingly over the last several years, runners are taking to the pool to continue their training while rehabilitating from a running-related injury.
Legs to the bottom of the pool, ladies and gentlemen. Down. Back straight, chest up. Sweep them.
Doug Stern's Deepwater running classes are very popular with metro athletes.
Your hair is still totally dry. We've got 25 seconds to go. You've got a sense of how fast you need to run to get to the finish line and get your best time. And Melissa, as you're running, see if you can press your hands back as well. And you know where they're going because your thumb passes your thigh. You can feel it. And we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and recovery. That's 2:04.
More than anything else, it allows them to continue running. Because you know, from a running background, you want to train anyway. Some way, somehow, you're going to find an excuse to go out and run. This allows you to continue running without any impact whatsoever. And incidentally, you're increasing range of motion in your joints, You're allowing the injury to recover by infusing blood into the area, and you're literally running at a faster rate. You're actually increasing your conditioning by running in the water. Because the resistance of the water is so great, you cannot run fast at first. But once your muscles get conditioned, you can get your heart rate pounding in the water. It takes some time, though, to do that. We do chest and back work. We do extensive abdominal work and lower back stretching. We do inner thigh work, outer thigh work, all strength work. Then they start with a half hour of cardiovascular conditioning after that. The strengthening work takes about 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll do intervals, we'll do long distance runs, we'll even run the New York City Marathon in the water. We have a 26.2 minute/mile run where we go over the entire course for the New York City Marathon in the water.
Interestingly, deep water running is attracting perfectly injury-free athletes, motivated to cross-train and maintain overall muscle tone.
Recreational cycling or even a triathlon are great for the muscles, the heart, and the head. And you don't have to shut it down in winter. The idea is to keep moving year-round. Train, race, and aim for that Sunday in early November when it all comes together. Back to the marathon course, the Bronx. Generally acknowledged to be the toughest section of the race, you're at the 20-mile mark, known to the seasoned marathoners as the wall, because for the untrained runner, this is about the time you run out of physical and mental energy. The 20-mile mark has been called halfway in a marathon because the last 6 miles seem to take as much energy as the first 20. Another challenging element, for the 1 mile in the Bronx, you are actually running away from the finish line, so it can be tough until you're back in Manhattan. But for the well-trained and well-prepared runner, it's a piece of cake. And you can always count on the neighborhood for an extra push. Again, part of the New York City Marathon experience are the days leading up to race day.
Marathon Week continues with a visit to the Marathon Expo at the Show Piers on the Hudson at Pier 92 on the west side of Manhattan. Race registration and packet pickup is at the expo, and there are plenty of opportunities to enhance the $125 million economic impact of the marathon. If you're going to run 26.2 miles through the streets of the 5 boroughs of New York City, you might as well buy a few t-shirts to commemorate the challenge. Getting closer to race day. The day before Marathon Sunday, 10,000 or so international runners assemble for the Continental Airlines International Friendship Run, a 4-mile jog from the United Nations to Central Park. A highlight of the Friendship Run, the presentation of the Abibi Bakila Award to 2-time New York City Marathon winner Tegla LaRupe. The international field releases a little pent-up energy. Athletes from more than 100 countries mix and mingle in a moving, non-competitive festival, celebrating worldwide kinship and camaraderie. Even hardened, I've-seen-it-all New Yorkers are somewhat startled to see 10,000 runners heading down 42nd Street the day before the marathon. Carbohydrates help runners get through those final few miles, and the Ronzoni Pasta Party serves enough fuel to keep the pace fast. Held the night before the race, the pasta party is part dinner, part disco, all marathon.
Back to the pavement and Manhattan. We're about 21 miles into the marathon, and now you're finally heading towards Central Park. This stretch of Fifth Avenue is known as the Museum Mile, an international destination and some very special real estate. Former New York City Marathon winner Gary Merca knows why more than 9 out of 10 get to the finish line.
From the start to the finish, you have people lined up, knowing exactly what you're doing. I always say, you know, we have these training runs in Central Park where people run 20 miles in the park. And I always told them that if they can run those 20 miles, there's no doubt that they're going to be able to finish the marathon. Because this is a marathon where the crowd actually picks you up at the Verrazano Bridge and deposits you at the finish line. And there's no way you're not going to be able to make it.
Finally, you've made it to Central Park, the promised land for New York City marathoners. Because if you've made it this far, you know you can make it to the finish line. Enjoy the journey.
The 24th and the 25th miles are in Central Park before heading out of the park for a brief stretch on 59th Street, then back into the park for the finish at Tavern on the Green. There are some rolling hills in the park, and you can definitely expect a momentary weariness. After all, you've probably been running for over 3.5 hours, but nobody quits here.
The course closes officially after 6.5 hours. That's when traffic gets back on it. However, we time until 10 hours because people could, after 6.5, can go on the sidewalk or they're inside the park, so traffic doesn't affect them. And we have always believed from day one when we began the race that we're a place for every pace, whether it's 2:07 or 8:50, it doesn't matter. We've always catered to them, have water stations out for them, food, and they're a star just like anybody else, because running is all about what you do for yourself. And if you're 2:07 and do it professionally, that's one thing. If you walk it in 6.5 hours, that's another. But each time you go out, you're accomplishing something and you want to beat your own time.
Left in the tank, no point in saving it for another day. Let your hair down and forget about being conservative. If you're already in the survival shuffle mode, you can find relief in knowing that in 10 minutes or so, you will have survived. It's on to Central Park South for a half mile or so before the turn back into the park for the finish. Before we get to the finish line, another visit with part of that year-round New York City Marathon experience. 30,000 or so get official numbers to run the race. However, tens of thousands more than that want to run. So the New York Roadrunners Club has developed several ways to improve your chances of getting one of those coveted running numbers. Several months before the event, over 10,000 gather for the annual New York City Marathon lineup.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, off you go!
Marathon applications received at the lineup significantly improve one's chances to get a running number, and many are in line long before the sun comes up. The lineup has become an event in itself, and many use the party to renew old acquaintances. Another marathon ritual where Club President Alan Steinfeld and the mayor pick out the lucky winners. The prize, the challenge of running 26.2 miles.
Shannon Riley, 333 East 75th Street, New York, New York.
Obviously, the other 2,990 will not be done here. We're back at the office. Look on the website tomorrow and the next day to see if you're a lucky winner. Thank you very much.
Back to 59th Street and the last few footsteps. Everyone can use a little help sometime.
Half mile to go. Come on, NYPD. Let's go.
On the far corner, the New York Athletic Club, home of numerous Olympic champions. And on this day, the champions fill the street.